Hi everyone, Salam, Linda. Guys, my share button is actually not working, which is kind of crazy. I don't know if I have a glitch, but if you guys can share the live out, I, for some reason, cannot share the live out. I'm not sure what's going on. So if you guys are joining us, we're about to get started with the event. Please share it out to everybody that you know. We have just a few more minutes before he comes in. And hopefully we don't have a glitch and everything is looking good here. So welcome in everybody. Good to see you. We're about to get started here in just a little bit. We have a guest today, a guest speaker with us, former U.S. Air Force Major Riley Livermore. So please share it out. We'll try to get as many people in here as possible, inshallah. My share button does not work for some reason. Not sure what is going on here. So hopefully we don't get a glitch. But welcome in, everyone. We'll wait a few minutes. Oh, wait, hold on one second. Let me go ahead here. All right, let's share the live, everyone. Salam, salam. W Shante, W Ronnie, W everyone. Appreciate you guys. Let's make sure we try to protect the live. If you guys are not a member, join the team. Team bracelets. I know he doesn't know how to use TikTok friendly language, so we're gonna try to protect the live as much as we can. And if you guys have any questions, I'm gonna see, hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A. I hope I don't have a glitch, so we'll see how this goes. All right, let me see here. All right, we're gonna get started in just about a minute. Let me go ahead and fix the layout here. We got our guest. Welcome. Let me see here. I don't know if you can hear us.
I can. Can you hear me?
We can.
Cool. Here.
Thank you so much for joining us and being here. Let me make sure. I don't know if you got the invitation, but let's just make sure. There we go. All right, we're just going to give it a few minutes before we get started to gather everybody here. So everybody, please share out the live. We have an amazing guest speaker with us today. All right. Thank you, everybody. All right. While we get everybody here, we're going to go ahead and get started with the introduction. So we have Riley Livermore. First joined the military in the summer of 2008 as a cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy. He commissioned as an officer and an engineer in the Air Force in 2012. Throughout his career, he had a series of assignments where he developed and tested autonomous and AI technologies with a specific focus on small drones. In 2016, he was selected for a research exchange to Haifa, where he spent 2 years doing missile guidance research at Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. His final assignment was leading an Air Force initiative to rapidly experiment with autonomous and AI technologies. He resigned his commission as a major in the U.S. Air Force in June 2024 in protest to the Biden administration's unconditional support for Israel's genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. Thank you so much for joining us today to share your story and experience. We are honored to have you with us today.
Yeah, happy to
I
be
want
here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course, of course. Thank you. Could you just start off by telling us about your background and how your upbringing played a part in shaping your views around the world, specifically surrounding Israel?
Yeah, totally. I grew up as an evangelical Christian, born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. My parents weren't exactly like we were. We weren't like hardcore Christian Zionists or anything. I think we were probably just more whatever the status quo is. We were kind of in favor of. So I don't remember growing up with particularly strong feelings about Israel either way. But I also obviously didn't know any history about Palestinians. I kind of assumed kind of the status quo, what or like kind of what the pervasive kind of propaganda was. I was in seventh grade when September 11th happened, so that was a very formative time for me. Just kind of getting caught up in the global war on terror, kind of George Bush and all that. Uh, and I also grew up next to an Air Force base. My grandfather was a fighter pilot in the Air Force, so I kind of that kind of kicked off a very like kind of patriotic, wanting to serve my country, fight against quote unquote terrorists, and so that kind of propelled me towards pursuing a career in the Air Force and the Air Force Academy. Um, I mean, I can. Is there? I mean, anything more? I don't know if you guys keep kind of talking
No,
or.
no, absolutely no. I have a series of questions. So,
Sure.
with that, now, about your time in Haifa between 2016 to 2018, could you tell us how your time there deepened your understanding of Israel's influence on American domestic politics? Because you did mention that you were there during, I think earlier, when I was reading about you, if you can tell us when you were there during the Trump elections.
Yeah, a couple things. So my I met my wife before we moved to Israel. Um, I met my wife in Ohio, and we had close friends. A coworker of mine who was Palestinian American, and so we became very close with them. And that was kind of my first foray into hearing the Palestinian perspective, and it was incredibly beneficial because when we found out, I applied for an exchange program. So the Air Force had a program where there were 16 different countries you could go to and do research at. And so I applied to the program not knowing what country I'd be selected for. And when I found out I was going to Israel, I was kind of like, I didn't know what to expect. And it was really powerful that my Palestinian friends, Palestinian American friends, were like, "Can we tell you? You're not going to hear the Palestinian perspective when you're there. You know, the U.S. State Department's not going to tell you. You're obviously going to get a very Zionist forward perspective." And so they kind of just told. I learned a bunch about the history of the Nakba and Six Day War, or the 6 Day War or 7 Day War. I can't. Sorry.
Yes.
67, 73, right? Like some of the different kind of some of those stories, obviously some of the talking points. They started. I just learned a little bit more, just kind of the Israel lobby, right? The broader coalition of forces, kind of how involved Israel is in our domestic politics. Um, and so that was just like it was really helpful because when we moved to Israel, we moved. Obama was still president, but we were there summer of 2016, so it was during the 2016 election. And so I was there in Israel when Donald Trump was elected, and then obviously through the first about 2 years of Trump's presidency. And so the there's so many things to talk about. I think one, it was such an interesting place just because how invested Israel is into American domestic politics. There's just a lot of. It was a really cool place to be because a lot of things that were happening in America, you kind of see the ties of what was going on in Israel. So it opened my eyes to a lot of how the dynamics work, right? The State Department, the U.S. State Department, how involved they are with Israel and all the Israeli politics, how that influences American politics. Uh, and I think the cool thing is I was somewhat inoculated a little bit because of my dear Palestinian friends. Of I didn't necessarily buy all of the Zionist talking points, hook, line, and sinker. Um, I think I did. Obviously, looking back, there was a lot of things because I primarily interacted with, Israelis, Jewish Israelis. Uh, so I did. That was more of an influence on me than I probably would have liked. But I always kind of protected me from going fully into just like hook, line, and sinker, bleeding, kind of all those Zionist talking points.
All right. Is this, I know this is your first time on TikTok, so I know you're kind of seeing all of these like things popping up. We can turn them off. I know it can be a little bit distracting, if that works better for you.
I mean, it is a little distracting, but
Okay.
I can manage it.
All right, guys.
It's
Let's
totally
hold
fine.
off.
I'm happy for people interacting. Like, I don't want to shut that down.
Taz, next time pick something else that's different that's that on the
Okay,
screen.
okay.
Like
All
the
right, guys,
coin
we'll
ones
hold
or
off. I
something.
appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys. Let's hold off, inshallah. All right, so what specific experiences or events led you to develop concerns about the situation in Palestine, and what particular moment or turning point prompted your decision to resign? I know you mentioned, like you spoke earlier in previous interviews about after October 7th and how that really shaped everything for you. If you can kind of go into detail about that.
Yeah, I think so. Just to kind of reiterate some stuff we were talking about, or just earlier, is I always kind of was felt uncomfortable with how Palestinians were talked about. Right? They're just now it's like obviously blatantly racist, but even some of the jokes of like in Gaza, like mowing the grass, right? Like there's this concept of like you just got to cut it down. Even that how the dehumanization, I see it so much clearly now, but it always kind of didn't sit quite right with me. Like I didn't really know what I was seeing, but um, it wasn't. Yeah, that was kind of the luminous tunnel. The other thing I realized too, just how disproportionate Israel's response always has been, right? So there is a stabbing somewhere or whatever, kids are throwing rocks at the IDF soldiers and they turn around and start shooting back, right? Like,
Hmm.
so when
Their
October 7th,
response.
yeah, their response, like, again, it's the cost, the value of life is very disproportionate, right? Like one Israeli soldier's life or Israeli citizen, right, is worth, hundreds of, I don't know what the ratio, if you look at kind of like number of killed between conflicts or injured, but it's huge, a huge disparity. So that never sat well with me. So when I saw October 7th happen, saw the news, saw the level of, you know, destruction that, or the number of lives lost during the attack on October 7th, I was like, oh, this is going to be really bad. Uh, and it just kind of paired honest the whole kind of paired well with just in my career I was becoming more and more disenfranchised or I was becoming just my view of the military and the forces that kind of motivated different actions was I was being I believed in it less and less. And I think the big thing I saw is I worked in the acquisitions kind of sector of the military, so we were responsible for buying and testing stuff that would be used in the field. And more I saw that these big military contractors they only cared about the bottom line. They didn't care about whether what was best for the U.S. government, what was how the stuff was used. And so I think when October 7th happened, Israel's response, and then I just saw that the Biden administration was just going to continue to write a blank check, and that these military contractors were not only okay with the level of destruction in Gaza, but they wanted more of it so they could make more money. Like that was kind of the thing that's like I don't want to be in the military anymore. Um, and so that's when I did the resignation process, and that was the end of October 2023. To get out of the military, though, it's a pretty lengthy. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. There's a number of things. It's not like an overnight thing. You can't just resign and leave. And so I started that process, and I didn't. It was something that I didn't think my voice was that people would care about. Me. I was like kind of a mid-level type person. I was stationed in Florida. I wasn't really directly involved in any something directly with Israel. And so outside of talking to some coworkers, my boss about like I was really you know disgusted and disheartened or whatever adjective you want to use for it about what was going on, I thought like I just leave and that was it. Um, and so, but what happened is because of the time it takes to get out, like as I never thought it would continue to go. I figured it would be way disproportionate, but I thought that Israel at some point the U.S. would say enough is enough. And just the longer it kept going and kept going, and I was still in the military, and just like becoming every day was harder and harder, and I was just like, I can't wait to get out. Um, and there's a couple key things that happened. I think the airman Aaron Bushnell, who self-immolated back in February, that was something that hit me really hard. Just someone was willing to set themselves on fire uh, as a form of protest for what was going on was like deeply impactful. And then it was a combination of Major Harrison Mann, who's in the Army, he was the first military person to publicly resign. And then seeing that was like, oh wow, that we I do have a voice, right? There's people out there that Harrison, he wrote a letter to his colleagues, and I read the letter and was like, this kind of encapsulates, me exactly. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And so there was an opportunity. A journalist was asking about like, is anyone else going through this thing? And it's like, you know what, I'm willing to do this. And I think that what kind of another thing that really pushed me over the edge too was I learned a lot more about how Israel is using AI targeting systems. They're using drone technology for just kind of basically making just the level of destruction, basically completely misusing it and realizing there's a lot of similarities in the work I was doing. And that's when I felt a lot more complicit. It kind of started connecting the dots of like, oh, the stuff I'm working on is a lot more related
Did
than
it
just like,
start in October 20? So was it October 27 when you started the resignation, and then it ended, it finally went through in June of
yeah, and there's
2024?
yeah, and some of that too is just uh, moving and some of the mechanics of all those things that went into place. But yeah, it's usually it's a 4 to 6 month process to get out of the military. So it's not quick. And so and I think the other thing too is like again hindsight bias being what it is. I wish I would have been louder sooner, but I didn't think it would just it kept getting worse and kept getting worse, and just that's when I started becoming going to protests and talking more about it. And it was like kind of I'm still waiting to get out of the military, right? And then that's when the opportunity to talk to a journalist and actually put a story out and go public and be on the record didn't happen until I think it was early June was the first time that happened. So um, yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Did anyone else follow your footsteps? Like you said, I feel like I was, just somebody, like one person. Did you feel like your resignation had anybody else followed through from the people, your colleagues, or anybody that you knew?
Not directly. I think the hard thing too, right? A lot of people are pretty dissatisfied in the military. I talked to a number of people who were, but the way it works is like you have a commitment, right? So if you're on the enlisted side, you sign a contract, and even the officer side, where I was at, it depending on where you are, what if the Air Force pays for higher education, for example, then you owe a certain amount of time back, right? So there's a lot of people who like this is messed up. I don't want to do this anymore, but they didn't really have an option. Or the only option I guess they did have was be a conscientious objector. So I do know a few people who have gone that route, uh, but that's a pretty that's like a pretty intensive process as well. So I think there's a lot of people. I was in a fortunately a situation where I didn't owe the military any more time. Like I could get out whenever I wanted, and so it kind of it made sense for me, and I was willing to like I said, I just the courage of the people before me, right? Starting with Josh Paul, who was the State Department, and a number of the resignees. It was just so cool to see a group of people across the federal government saying like enough is enough, and to be part of that group and have an opportunity to join forces with them and just kind of I think as a collective say that this is completely messed up and we're not going to stand for it has been a really powerful thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you kind of touched base on this. We kind of spoke about it, but if you can just reiterate, how did your personal values or beliefs conflict with your duties in the military or in the U.S. Air Force?
Um, yeah, I think it's just I think I didn't realize how, and this is starting back from September 11th, right? Just the way we use terrorists, the way we talk about who gets the right to defend themselves, right, and who's a terrorist. I think just the level of dehumanization. I think the fear of Muslim people, of brown people, right. Um, I think that was pretty deeply embedded in me, and I think it just kind of it got baked into like the military psyche. And as I got to know again my friends and Palestinian American friends, as we got to know Palestinian Israelis, I mean they would call themselves I guess what they called Arab Israelis, but just the hospitality, the love, just everything about the culture. It was just, you just start to see like, this is not the story people tell themselves and people are afraid about, is completely, it's a means to dehumanize people so that we don't feel as bad when they're killed, right? And so I think once you start to see that, you start to look at, other conflicts that the military has been involved in. You look at the Afghan withdrawal, right? Like I had a lot of friends. I never was deployed to Afghanistan, but a number of people deployed to Afghanistan, and just the level of devastation we've done to that people, and it all starts to come together, right? And it's
Hmm.
and I just even something silly, right? How families and people in military divorces, there's a lot of stuff that people make a lot of sacrifices, and I was kind of like, what is this for? And so once I started dehumanizing uh, non-white people, and I started seeing how technology I was working on, that the people who are supposed to make decisions and show restraint are totally fine signing over a blank check to an authoritarian foreign government to do whatever they want and will bankroll it. That's kind of it. Just that was the tipping point for me.
Oh, it's powerful. What I mean, because it's very interesting to hear like the dehumanization part of how much people of color, or you know, the way that they are dehumanized in America specifically is very disheartening, and it takes a lot to dismantle that. What role do you think military personnel should play in holding governments accountable for their actions in conflicts?
Like our government,
Yes.
yeah. The problem is, obviously, I think if you are aware, like become aware of these things, I think you have a duty to act in some form or fashion, right? Even if it's just as simple as um, calling stuff out and saying like, this isn't right. It's so hard to say, right? I think I think the hard thing I struggle with a lot too is I think the people I worked with in the military I really liked and respected. I think there are people who uh, like I guess they believed it and they were there. There's not. I think the thing that's so hard about it, it's like a system level problem, right? It's not like there's a couple bad apples. It's like the whole concept, right? The military is used to prop up American imperialist interests, right? So uh, that was kind of the thing. That realization to me is the people I worked with, I have a ton of respect for. I really enjoyed working with. I thought they were, again, worked hard. They worked for something they believed in. It's just that there's this kind of the narrative, the story we believe in ourselves is we're working for the common good, and I think we were just more or less pawns for capitalism and to keep countries in check.
Um, I know, like, with what's going on in Gaza, the genocide, how did like witnessing the unaliving, we say unaliving, but the killing of children like Hind Rajab and Muhammad Bahar personally impact you?
Well, yeah, like in the HA plus piece, I was talking and I said, it's just you. I again, when you get past the dehumanization piece, like these are humans too, right? These are. I just saw like, I have a daughter who's Hind Rajab's, the same age, and just I think about when I think about if she was this happened to her, right? Like how would I would feel? And it's absolutely crushing. And then I think all the time, my son has a number of disabilities. He takes multiple medicines, and just thinking about um, being a parent, right? And just like not being able, like watching your child slowly die because they're not getting medicine for no good reason. Um, and to realize, just to think about, how would I would feel if, you know, a country was doing this. It would make me so angry. Um, and again, I think we implicitly we know that, right? If the roles were reversed and you know whatever, if Gaza was like bombing hospitals and I mean, we saw the outrage of October 7th, and that's like not even scratching the surface of what kind of has been done in kind. And so just the double standard. But I think again, just it's the humanization piece of it. It's like when you realize that these are humans too, people they just want to live. I think it just that's what's been so good about social media, right? Primarily, Instagram is where I get most of the stuff. But like, I've read a lot of poetry of Moussa Babu Toha, and a number of Palestinian authors, and you just kind of feel like we're humans, right? We're all like our liberation's bound up together, right? If we can thoughtlessly kill beautiful little children, um, it's like what I don't know what kind of world that is, and what's to prevent someone from doing the same thing to my kids.
So were you able to take this and like pass it like to your family? Like how was that with your family, like your extended family, trying to teach them like, hey, like these are people. Like, we see that most people in the West or different countries are kind of just like, they moved on from this, right? It's just another, you hear a lot of people say it's war, they don't call it a genocide. So for you, when you stopped the dehumanization, were you able to pass that along and was that accepted? And were people in your family or friends, or, extended family, extended friends, were they able to also understand that?
No, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of again that's been frustrating, right? Like obviously my wife, kind of immediate friends, totally understand, but like my parents, for example, like they don't. There's just a disconnect, and I think there's a chosen ignorance, right? Like there's a oh, what's but basically like they don't want to look or and honestly I think the problem is it's so layered, right? One is like the complicity of the media, the fact that mainstream media, the way they cover it, how they word things, right? How just kind of the Zionist bent to all that language. Like it's really hard if you're not looking or kind of opening yourself to alternate forms of media. It's just everything gets kind of downplayed and gaslit, right? The U.S. State Department, the broader political like Democrats and Republicans, right? There's a lot of it's so hard. I think a lot of it is just there's a chosen ignorance on the people like my parents, but that also that's kind of reinforced by that they don't run into it, right? Unless you look for it. And so bringing that around, I think there's all this again, just from the 2000s, just terrorists, but Hamas are terrorists, right? And then you all the kind of the talking points that hold any water just get kind of regurgitated without thinking about them, and it's super frustrating.
Hey, man, that's tough. As Palestinians, it's hard to
No,
hear, but it's the
I feel,
reality, right?
yeah, I don't even know. I can't even imagine as a Palestinian. Like, I feel, I'm furious, and I'm not. Uh, it's personal in a sense because I've chosen to make it somewhat personal, and I've got friends and people I love who are more directly affected. But I think that's what makes it so hurtful. Is I think people again, it's like the nice racist, right? Like the America mid-century Jim Crow South. There's plenty of really nice white people, I'm putting in quotes, in the South that were just horrible to black people, because they thought that's whatever the case may be. And I think it's the same thing. I see that same kind of thing manifest in people I love and care deeply about, and it's really really hard.
No, I agree, and I'm very, like I said, it's hard to hear, but this is something that and anybody that is in the West listen to and say, you know what, this is a problem. This is a problem that's embedded in the Western culture. I don't know what,
Yeah.
it hurts. It hurts to hear, but it's the truth. So I applaud you for, speaking up on that. Um, just a few more questions before we go into Q&A. I know there's
Sure.
a lot of people that want to come up and ask questions. So, and then from the panelists as well. Um, how did your perspective on the role of the US in international conflicts evolve during your service? I know you mentioned slowly, but like, are there, like, how did it start with? Because I know um, September 11, you were still young. You didn't serve yet, but that's kind of what made you get into wanting to serve. But how did your perspective on the role of the US in international conflicts evolve during your service?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just kind of bought it at face value, right? My parents are Republicans. I grew up, I was a registered Republican when I turned 18. And I kind of just thought that Republicans were Christians and, helping people become Christians around the world and democracy was like a noble thing, right? So I kind of bought hook, line, and sinker, the logic, George W. Bush in that time. And so that carried through. Obviously, when I was a cadet, I was a college student. So it was very academic, my interaction with the world. I didn't really see kind of how things were done. And then it really kind of started to change, I think, when I went over to Israel. I think I saw, you just get a feel. Well, actually, it started. So before I went to Israel, I did 6 months of Hebrew language training in Washington, D.C. So that's where I kind of started learning the language, got good enough when I went over that I was able to kind of like become fluent. But the way the language training works is each it's independent tutors, right? So we went to a kind of this building and had a bunch of these small little offices, and there's 30, 40 students learning 30, 40 different languages, right? A lot from the military, State Department, et cetera. And so it was really cool. In break time, we'd come and, these learning German, the students learning Mandarin, the students learning Turkish, whatever, all these different languages. And that's when you started to get like different cultures, right? How Arabic was another one too, like learning people going to Jordan and to Morocco and to Saudi Arabia. And realizing like how language and culture, and that was my kind of first real foray. And I was fascinated by how you speak influences how you think, and history and the effects of that as well. And then you start to realize, I mean, talking to students learning Mandarin, like China and the history of China, and then you realize like, oh, the U.S. If China was doing to the U.S. what the U.S. is doing to China, we would be not like that at all. Like just this huge military presence completely surrounding this country. And I started to see kind of a little bit of our double standard. Um, and then even moving to Israel, right? There's the same thing. I had a number of just interactions with a bunch of people from the Jewish diaspora, right? People came back to Israel, but also Palestinian people with Israeli citizenship, and just that's when you start just learning people's different stories and understanding different perspectives, and it's a lot of the kind of the simplified, we're good, we're fighting against the bad guys started to kind of fade away. And then I think I slowly start to see how the role of money and kind of capitalism was just supercharging death and destruction, right? That just to make more money. And so that's where the dominoes continued. Like as I started to see more, it kind of opened up more things, right? And it was just kind of this ongoing loop, if that makes sense. I could kind of go down a lot
Yeah, no,
more. Like there's a lot more individual kind of stories and
yeah, no,
anecdotes,
it
but
makes sense.
for the
No,
sake of time.
absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And then my final question before I get to the guests, we have over 300 people here, so I appreciate everybody who's here. Um, what do you believe the general public should know about the conflict in Palestine that isn't widely discussed?
Oh, I mean, I think if people knew like how much money we're sending to Israel um, to bomb and just destroy people, like our own taxpayer dollars, right? We don't. I think to me, there's so many layers of this, but I think fundamentally, like we're enabling. Again, I don't. We're enabling this extreme right wing party, but just Zionism in general, to like completely obliterate and ethnically cleanse Palestinians. But now with Lebanon and Iran, like we're just escalating war in the Middle East, and it's costing billions and billions of American taxpayer dollars that could be spent on so many other things. Um, like even an appeal to self interest, right? Even if it was this would be bad even if America wasn't bankrolling it, but I think it's exponentially worse. I think from my perspective, just how we are complicit in enabling this genocide. And I think if people really realized that and it was reported what's actually happening, I think people would be horrified.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so, so much. I appreciate that. I'm going to start passing it off to our panelists and guests that want to ask you any questions. Let's go ahead and start off with JBS. I know you've been waiting. So go ahead, JBS. He is the one at the bottom corner right over here. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Taz, for doing this. I appreciate it. Appreciate your service first and foremost. A couple of questions for you. I saw an interview with Jabal Bowman earlier today, and he talked about how on October 7th, he received talking points on how to respond to October 7th. And one of those sentences included a statement that says the unprovoked attack by the H group, which we know is a fallacy. What kind of talking points did you get in the military to respond when you're in front of the media, especially as an officer in service? Did you get any at all?
Yeah, I didn't have any. I mean, my role too was not directly involved with anything that had to do with what the conflict that was going on. So,
Got it. Go ahead.
No, just go for it.
My next question is, so I think what you're doing here is really providing a ton of education, not only on this platform, but interviews you've done. What more can we do in the diaspora to amplify the voice of the Palestinians and change the narrative? Because I think you talked about willful ignorance earlier and how people turn a blind eye to the obvious. Obviously, our Western media has a great deal to do with that and how they portray how it's happening. And so how do we on the ground continue to amplify the Palestinian voices, change the narrative so that our government, who is complicit under the Arms Export Act, as well as the Leahy Law, is no longer complicit ultimately? So what are your thoughts there?
That's a good question. I think as what I've seen, just getting to know and seeing the Palestinian American movement, it's so beautiful. I think there's been, honestly, it's from my perspective, right? It seems like there's been, and maybe just because I'm in the kind of the ecosystem, the bubble, the algorithms showing me a lot more stuff, but just my exposure to so many more Palestinian American artists and writers and speakers and just people, I think continuing to live your life and to, just show the beautiful side of your culture and your heritage is just, that's what changed me, right? Is like, it makes me emotional, right? Because I think of my friends, and I told my wife, it's like, if I could pick anyone in the world to be my neighbors, it would be them. And so I think how you interact with people around you, not that you have to be like this model minority, right? Like that you're humans, right? Especially this time, there's so much grief, but there's so much beauty there. And I think just continuing to let that shine just does wonders. And like, it takes someone who's like, a Republican Christian nationalist, right? And it kind of was softening me to like do what I'm doing now.
Well, I appreciate your vulnerability, man. Thank you so much for joining Taz on this panel. It takes a lot.
No, I'm happy. Like once you reached out, I'm happy to do it. It feels like it's the least I could do.
I appreciate it. All right. Thank you, Taz, for the opportunity. I'll defer back to you for others to ask.
Thank you, JBS. I appreciate that. All right, we'll go to Mo Pesci. Oh, I don't know if Mo, if you're ready or not. Otherwise,
Do you want me to ask
we'll
a question from the chat?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Riley. Nice to meet you.
I couldn't unmute. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mo. Go ahead, Mo. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mo.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm sorry about that. I just want to give you actually a heartfelt appreciation more than anything. Myself, as many others, my story is not unique. 180 family members, 27 that are currently alive. So it was a really refreshing, it was just a refreshing testimony to hear what you had to say. And I'm so appreciated and so humbled by what you said. And I know that is pretty much the sentiment a lot of us have. And I just want to know, actually, I want to say to you, and I want you to know, you will always have me for support. I am an unknown brother to you. So at any given time, if you ever need anything, and I'm pretty sure I speak for JBS and every single one of us, if you ever need something, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. We sincerely appreciate you. 180 souls appreciate you, and so many others who you don't even know their names appreciate you. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate. I mean, like the level of grief, like I said, you must be going through, have been going through. It just something I didn't share. Sorry. November 10th last year, a close friend of mine died in an accident, and so it was a really. That was another thing I think. It was just like it was sudden. Like he had two kids. It was really hard, and at the same time, it was such an interesting juxtaposition of like his wife was given, Social Security and insurance, like she had a bunch of money. The military gave her, we had family and a funeral and just the grieving and everyone come together and time off. And I remember going through this and just grieving and just like losing a friend and just was a kind of a tragic loss. And then just, again, thinking about like, Mo, it's like 180 family members and you can't even grieve people you've lost because you don't know if you're going to die tonight. And so that just, I think that really, really stuck with me. And it, just the visceral feeling of losing someone you deeply care for. And knowing that, like, his widow's wife or widow and his kids, their needs are going to be met, right? The community support that comes around them and realizing that that wasn't the same thing that's happening in Gaza still. And I think the thing is, like, I feel like if the roles were reversed, I know Palestinian American, just everyone on this call would probably do the exact same thing, if not more than what I'm doing. So I'm just happy to do the little piece I can.
Hey Taz, before you go on to the next one, I'm gonna say something and drop to give someone else a chance to come up. By the way, Riley, I served from '89 to '97 in the Marine Corps, and I'll wrap with this as I let someone else come up. Again, appreciate your time, and I'm reminded of a quote by Mahmoud Darwish who says, "Are we what we do with time, or is time that what we do with that, or are we what time does with us?" And so the fact that you're giving back your time today because you're using it wisely, you're giving back an opportunity to share your stories, which are lived experiences, and it changes the dynamic for the landscape. So for that, we're truly appreciative. And I will testify to what Mo said. If you ever need anything, man, you can always reach out. Taz, I'll drop so you can get someone else up here. I'll stay in the chat to listen up and ask questions if they come up in the chat. Thank you so much for having this. God bless, man, and we'll chat later.
Thank you, JBS. Thank you. Oh man, I'm getting emotional over here.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a crier. I don't know if so for better or for worse was the AJ question.
You're a human, and you're a good human. And
Yeah.
honestly, it's so good to see that there are good people out there with good hearts. So, Zubaydah, go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me good?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi Riley. First and foremost, I wanted to say that it's incredible, your story and your journey to hear. And I think it definitely gives us a lot of reassurance and a lot of hope because, the odds are definitely against us as a group of people who are continuously stigmatized, negatively stereotyped. And to see somebody who was a part of that institution sort of, have a light bulb moment and realize that this is wrong. It must have been incredibly difficult, but also like relieving for yourself to be able to actually align yourself with good consciousness rather than just follow blindly. Absolutely hats off to you in regards to that. My question is, because we do a lot of online advocacy and advocacy just in general for Palestine. And some of us, we do end up engaging in discussions with, people who are Zionists and they try to run with a specific narrative in order to justify the crimes that they're committing. And one of the major ones that I hear, and I think it would be suitable to ask you as somebody who was within the military, is that they keep on trying to convince the world that what they are doing is they're conducting a war and they're doing it proportionally. And we always say that this isn't a war, this is a genocide, because as we can see, the casualties are made up of more civilians than the actual military target that they claim to be targeting. And so from your military expertise, would you say, looking at their military strategy and their tactics, that this is in alignment with, first and foremost, human rights? It is in alignment with the Geneva Convention. It is in alignment with the conduct of war. Or would you say that they've gone completely straight off that and they're just acting out of their own desires, their whims, and their arrogance, from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of right. There's no one in good faith can say this is something remotely close to proportional or within the laws of armed conflict. I mean, starvation, corporate punishment, like, is by definition against the laws of Geneva Convention. Just if you look at, you think what Gallant said October 8th or whatever, the human animals, right, where there's going to be no food, no water, like, that's completely a war crime. And then, yeah, using the thing I always take away is, I mean, the U.S. military committed a bunch of war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. But Israel's doing stuff with our weapons that we would never do ourselves, just because it's how egregious it is, right? So using 2,000-pound bombs in highly densely populated areas, non-precision guided munitions, like, those stuff is just, it's so disgustingly apparent. I think that's kind of where, it doesn't even, I guess if you want to be willfully ignorant, it might work and make you feel better about yourself, but no one in good conscience can look at that and say that's legitimate.
And just a quick follow-up question, like, another thing is that they will continuously gaslight us. And when we point out that they're targeting, like, civilian complexes like schools and tents, and they say, oh, Hamas is hiding amongst them. Now, I don't know, I maybe this is not rocket science, but I know if I had the option of pressing that button, knowing that there will be far more casualties being killed than one person, because there have been cases where they've struck like a whole school for one individual, which has resulted in a ratio from 1 to 100. I mean, what is, again, the protocol in dealing with a situation like that if there is a target, but, there are civilians around? Is it justifiable to just strike anyway, essentially?
I think the perfect counterexample to that is Osama bin Laden. So I remember 2011 is when the command was given. He was in Pakistan, and we knew where he was. He was in a compound. We could have easily done an airstrike to kill him, but they knew that, I think, multiple wives, children, probably 10 to 15 women and children, right? So, I mean, by Gaza standards, right, that was, very proportional. We could have just done a missile strike and taken them out, but they sent a couple SEAL Team 6s, into Pakistan, right? So there was enormous measures for someone to the level of Osama bin Laden to make sure that only he was harmed the U.S. took. Now, I'm not saying we did that all the time, right? We've done plenty of things where we've shot the wrong building or made mistakes, but it's an example of proportionality, I think, or the levels that the U.S. military was willing to go for such a high-level target, and to see just that compared to what, I mean, again, it's not even remotely good faith. I just think unfortunately, people just regurgitating those talking points they don't really want to know. I think it's the frustrating thing. It's not like, oh, I really want to know, like, what's the right number. It's just like, this is the way to make themselves feel good about themselves, or to, like, forget and move on.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I don't have any more questions. Thank you so much, Sister
It's
Taz.
incredibly frustrating, right? Like, I got I know it was not quite a shouting match with my dad a couple of months ago, about the same thing, right? And he just kept throwing out all the kind of the bullshit,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's whatever, man. I don't know. That, to some degree, like, I wish you could rationally reason with people, and I think it just goes back to the thing is, like, seeing people's humanity. I think is the biggest way, and that's unfortunately some of it's a system level problem, not just individual bad apples.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I appreciate that. If you wanted to drop me, Taz, and bring someone else up, that's completely fine.
Thank you, Sister Zubaydah. Appreciate you. Those were really good questions. We'll go to DD next. Go ahead, D.
Hi guys, how are you? First and foremost, thank you for your service. And thank you for being here. I think this is a really, really educational live. And I think these words need to be spoken, right? I'm going to actually do a mod announcement. I know I understand that you're new to TikTok, so I apologize. It's going to sound a little foreign to you, but bear with us. Guys, let's get on a subwave Let's push the live out to the FYP. By doing so, we need subs. Let's do it. Let's move the room along. Taz has the lowest subscription possible. Get the room up and running. Get on the FYP, get more people to hear about Palestine. This is super, super important. This gentleman's words are very important. Let's go, guys. I'm going to start with somebody, I'm going to start with my own question, actually. Before that, one of the most common questions that I ask Americans, like myself, when we have conversations, because the degree of misinformation is vast, right? I come to this one question almost always, and that's explain to me how Israel is truly an ally, right? And there really aren't many answers to give us that. So as someone that served with the United States, really, I struggle with it, and I'm going to kind of ask you, why is it that we go so hard for this allyship that truly, to me, is one-sided? And when I say that, I mean Soleimani, right? Under Trump, better or worse, he was a target. They backed out at the ninth hour, right? Iraq, they weren't there. Afghanistan, they weren't there. Syria, they weren't there. How is this an ally? It's really one-sided, right? Get into the numbers. I'm a really big numbers girl. The numbers are so skewed, it's not even funny.
Sure.
So it's kind of always my question, why is it that we're going so hard for a non-ally?
I think it's more ideological, right? Like, I don't know. This is something I didn't necessarily learn in the military. I just don't think it's that question. I think obviously there is a large Christian, kind of, I'll speak from the Christian perspective. Just like return of the Messiah kind of thing, right? Israel, right? Kind of leading into like end times prophecies. So there's a huge organizations like Kufi, Christians United for Israel. Just a bunch of these people get on these talking tours, and there's just this negative cycle of like they get power. There's the American political stuff, and then the Israeli politics plays right into that, right? So if you go to like a Holy Land tour, they kind of just feed right into that thing. So there's like this. Israel feels different just because there's kind of this. It's intentionally kind of geared towards Christians, naive Christians, thinking that this is the same Israel of the Bible, right? And so I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Where if it was any other country, I think we would afford them the same benefits. I also think that it's predominantly like white European, and a lot of European Jews resettled. So I think there's kind of the European. It's not a NATO country, but it has kind of a little bit of that same vibe, right? So there's some of that subconsciously, I think, from a white American perspective. And then I think there's a lot of stuff too, like I talked about this a little bit in my AJ Plus piece, but I mean, the fact that Israel is constantly, is actively oppressing Palestinians, and technology is a huge way of doing that. There's this feedback loop of technology. And so they're able to develop and test technology much more efficiently just because they're actually using it to oppress Palestinians, whereas it's a little bit harder on the American military side just because we don't necessarily have like a real life proving ground that we're kind of iterating on our stuff. So a lot of their tech, 8200 Shmonim time, the kind of a lot of the spy techware is actually pretty solid in Israel. That does probably make itself back to kind of American military complex. So I think there's some of those aspects, right? We can have weapons and things in there. We can get real world data of how they're using it against, Hezbollah or different organizations or Palestinians in general. So there's that feedback loop that probably gives a little bit of value, I think, from a American military perspective.
Did you?
Does that mean these are kind of my stuff that's some stuff I've observed.
I get that.
It's very I think the thing about it is it's very strategic, right? Like you hit the religious piece, right? Like there's this kind of Israel is not a country, it's kind of more of God's chosen people. Like all that stuff is super powerful, especially for the right-wing conservative base. I think there's a decent amount of money that Israel has, right? And I think it's very European in nature, so that it's more aligns with culturally kind of Western countries, right? So there's a little bit more easy, it's different from some other countries where I think we can relate more to. kind of Israelis just because of the nature of how the occupation started. And then I think there's at the lower level of just kind of like the technology, military working back and forth, even though it's really more or less a one-way road.
That it's just always disheartening to kind of hear the religious aspect. So, like, as a personal background, husband was born is Italian and born Catholic. He's a revert, and went over. I'm Palestinian. We went over to Jerusalem. My mother-in-law is super, super Catholic, and just the degree of the way she was dragged in Israel, literally spit at her feet. You know what I mean? Like it's always hard for me to hear that religious conversation and to actually see how Christians are treated there, how Christians are treated in Jerusalem. I mean, they're literally being ethnically cleansed, by the neighborhoods. So that was a hard one. That one's such a hard one. Did you experience any of that or see any of that there?
No, well, a little bit, right? So the difference is it didn't sit very well with me. Like the first time we went to Jerusalem, we did kind of like this like hotel because we were moving there. We were waiting to get our apartment. So we were staying in a hotel and they had free tours to Jerusalem. So my wife and I went. The first time we went, like, we don't like this at all. We call it like a Christian Disneyland. Like even stuff as simple as like the way they talk about the Muslim quarter in Jerusalem is like, it's dangerous, right? It's just, there's a lot of like this stuff that gets kind of planted. You're like, dangerous, what? And just the way it's kind of, you kind of get whisked from place to place and kind of told this whole story. And we actually met a Palestinian Christian who grew up in the old city who was a tour guide. And so once we met him and got kind of more of that inside scoop, we started to enjoy the city, Jerusalem, kind of saw it with fresh eyes, made a huge difference. But it definitely was, there's some things that I picked up on right away of like, there's more going on here than meets the eye, right? And I think the problem is most people who do the Christian Holy Land tours, it's very curated. Even if you go into the West Bank, you're going to Nazareth, right? The church of Nazareth, or you're going into like not necessarily Nazareth, you're Bethlehem, you're going to Jericho, but it's very like curated, picked spots that you don't see what's going on. It's all by design, right? So like I think there's like an evil genius part of it of how they weave the story and tell the story, and it's pretty compelling, especially if you don't want to look for you don't want to question anything.
Okay, and I just wanted to ask one other question. We've got a Trump presidency walking in. His picks are heavy Israelis, Israeli sympathizing. Your thoughts? I know that during his last presidency, there were a lot of conversations by the generals against strategies, against, I'm in interest of full disclosure, I've been a registered Republican since the age of 18. However, I did not vote for Trump this go around or the last, right? So I kind of want to preface that. But my conversation here is, there were generals that were candidly saying that he was dangerous. He was dangerous for America. What are your thoughts here on what he's kind of centering around? He's had dangerous rhetoric of, finish them, which I don't know, it could be construed in a couple of different ways. But thoughts there?
I mean, I think the fact that, like, obviously the first foreign leader to congratulate him was Bibi Netanyahu says a lot. And I know Smotrich and some of the other, Ben Gvir and some of the other kind of far-right ministers feel more emboldened now, which is really scary. But at the same time, right, the fact that it was, I don't know. What I'll say is how disappointed that the Democratic Party, Blinken on down, quote unquote, said the right things and then just were completely a doormat. So I don't know functionally how much will change with the Trump presidency as far as the posture towards Israel, which is not saying much. The only silver lining potentially is he's going to be so incredibly dysfunctional that it's going to cause a lot more people to say, like, I can't do this anymore. Or maybe the Democratic Party will actually find a spine and say, like, you know what, we're going to be more vocal about supporting unconditional military aid to Israel. I mean, that's maybe the only silver lining I can find. It feels very dark. And that's why I don't know. yeah, solidarity. That's the, taking care of each other, right? Doing what we can with kind of to, but that's that's kind of what this is.
Thank you. Dee, did you?
Nope, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Hello,
Dee.
Riley.
Thank you.
Hello, Riley. Nice to meet you. I'm just gonna ask questions from the chat, Taz, if that's okay instead. One of the first questions we have is, what do you think about Aaron Bushnell and what he did, and how did the government pay their respects?
Again, I don't know. I've been inside the Israeli embassy a couple of times. So I know just watching the video was kind of otherworldly, right? Because I saw where he was, and it's like I was right in front of the guard shack. I was like, I've been there. So it really touched me. I'm just like from a personal experience, and then just to think about what the courage would take to douse yourself in flammable liquids and set yourself on fire while you scream "Free Palestine." Like the level of commitment and belief in what he did was very powerful, and I was not surprised, but I was very, very disappointed in the level of just basically how he kind of got ghosted by, some kind of like mealy mouth, like platitudes, right? And then just, I think they kind of blamed mental health and then kind of moved on as quickly as possible. Was incredibly disappointing, but not surprising.
Another question from Moody: Did you serve through any other conflicts?
Yeah, so I kind of was brought up in the global war on terror, right? So Iraq, I didn't. So the nature of my job in the military was I was more, with the exception of the 2 years I lived in Israel, I was in the U.S. So I did a lot more like kind of research and development, acquisitions work. So I was never deployed or served in any kind of operational sense. But yeah, I mean, Afghanistan, Iraq, I have plenty of friends, went all over the world. So I have a lot of secondhand experiences or talking with people, right? I was in, but Iraq and Afghanistan were kind of the two main ones. But Syria was going on in the mid 20s. Like I was there kind of through the Arab Spring and the military's response for it. So,
Did you take part of helping the Israelis before you resigned?
what do you mean helping the Israelis?
I don't know. The question was, did you help Israelis? Like I guess were you helping them?
No, I wasn't directly involved in anything with Israel. It's ironic actually. The last time I was in, Palestine and Israel was summer of 2022. I was there for 3 weeks, kind of like a language kind of keep up thing. And there's an opportunity. They were doing some joint military U.S. Israel exercise in end of October 2023, and they were looking for volunteers to go. And so, because I had small children and a number of factors, like I wasn't going to do it. But that was kind of it was like a very interesting. So that would have been a case where I was actually working with Israel and kind of more directly involved, probably with oppressing Palestinians. So I'm glad I didn't do that. But no, I was not. I think my personal experiences motivated me more than anything, but I was not like directly complicit in sending weapons or supporting operations in any form of faction in Gaza.
And then, have you made any effort to spread the word to people that you know or your fellow soldiers as well?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, it's hard because a lot of people, if they still have commitments or, I don't know. I wish I could make people feel the way I feel. I think some people just, by virtue of a variety of factors, don't feel as strongly about it just because they're able to desensitize or, distance themselves from the situation. Or just, I know people like, fortunately, I found a job that has good health insurance, but my son has a lot of health complications and the military has really good health insurance. So there's a lot of people who kind of feel stuck. They've got debt or they owe time, or there's a lot of things where it's hard for them to get under. I'm not saying those are valid excuses for not speaking up against genocide, but I think those are kind of, when I talk to people, I got a lot of like, yeah, that's really horrible. And then like the conversation switch otherwise. So I think a lot of people are really, generally speaking, I would say people feel uneasy about it, but they don't they don't want to take the steps to make, a stink or they don't think anyone would care if they did. Right. And I think that's one of the downsides of kind of our culture in general is, right, we're very individualistic.
So much for answering the chat questions. I'm gonna throw it down to Ronnie. W. Riley, guys.
W. Riley. Go ahead, Ron.
Hello, first of all, thank you for having me up here, Taz. Thank you to everybody being here, and biggest thank you to you, Riley. First of all, for your service and for participating in this conversation and sharing your time with us. I listen to you. I listen to your background and everything, and I think it's really important to understand where you come from and how you basically grew up. Understanding that you come from a Christian background. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry. Understanding that you come from a Christian background, your family, you and your family are Christian. I guess my question is going to be two parts. First off, what is, with American Christians in general, what's the whole obsession with Christians in America supporting Israel? And as myself, as someone who's Lebanese, Palestinian, American, and Christian, how do we convince American Christians to understand that supporting Israel is not like the right thing to do based on their actions against the Palestinians and now also against the Lebanese?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think honestly, it's intellectually laziness. I think people and that's kind of honestly how I was raised, is like, you just look like, oh, Second Timothy this says this, so that must be true, right? And I'm gonna selectively pick verses, and like I can open my Bible and it says Israel, and oh, there's Israel on the map, and therefore this is the same, right? What if there's a few proof texts? And I think people just fall for that. And I think just kind of the nature of like churches today, right, are very much kind of like consumer focused. Like, let's just chop up these sermons into very digestible. You don't really have to wrestle with the text. And I think that's actually something that was beautiful that I learned living in Israel, is actually learn more about Judaism, and that kind of opened me up to I feel like I grew in my faith a lot more, learning about the Jewish midrash and like how the rabbis kind of wrestled with the text, and they used the Torah and the Holy Scriptures as a place to start asking questions, as opposed to like the answer to their questions. And so I think through that learned this like simplified kind of diet religion. Let me just give you the answer you want. You don't have to think about it and move on. Has some really profound consequences. And I think when you understand living in Palestine, right? Like understanding Jesus was Palestinian, right? Under a European occupation, right? Suffering a genocide, right? There was a ethnic cleansing genocide, according to Matthew, Herod's trying to kill all the newborn kids, children, right? So they were refugees, like all these like check. It's like Jesus is like some dude in Gaza right now, just trying to make it out, getting killed by the state. It's so clear to me, right? And you understand that in context. And so maybe, you could try to explain that, but I think white supremacy and I think people's just desire for something to be simple and easy they don't want to think about is a huge impediment. So I think finding people who are curious, understanding contextually, kind of placing Jesus in the context of the time and like how brutal the Roman Empire is. We've even kind of made the Roman Empire much prettier now than they really were. They were just a brutally violent and vicious occupying power. And so understanding that history more, I think, kind of opened me up to seeing like how wrong what the current state of Israel is doing.
Right, I appreciate your perspective.
If you figure out how to make people curious and want to ask hard questions and rethink stuff and question white supremacy and all those stuff, let me know, because I haven't found that secret sauce yet.
I think we're all looking for that.
Yeah.
Do you see any progress in your community, in your own community, when it comes to unlearning what a lot of people have learned about Zionism and waking up to the truth?
I definitely think there's some generational shifts. To be fair, I've kind of walked away from evangelicalism. I still would probably call myself a Christian just because I believe in the person of Jesus, right? And that's kind of the faith I was handed, and I think it was bastardized and kind of exploited. But I'm no longer a member of an evangelical congregation. I find it a very toxic space for me. so I don't know, right? I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in a lot of regards for, but I think I do take comfort in the fact that the kind of the church unit as itself is kind of more a dying organization. People in my generation and younger, like, this is my stuff, man. I'm not gonna, and it's not just stuff like, Israel Palestine, right? You think of LGBTQ rights, you think of a lot of these things where like the church has kind of swung and missed time and time again. And it gets repackaged and tried to make it a little bit sexier, but I still think there's a lot of people who are seeing through it, or at least don't buy it all the way. How hopeful I am, I don't know. Yeah.
I appreciate it. No, thank you so much. I have one more question from the chat from just another question from Moody, and then I'm going to pass it up to my Palestinian sister Rima right above me. Moody asked, what was your commander's response to your resignation?
He was super supportive. I mean, I think he was actually a very incredible, like, very supportive leader, and just said, because I told him right before I decided to quit, I said, hey, listen, I'm calling my congressman and senator every day, and I feel like I'm not being listened to. To be fair, my congressman was Matt Gaetz at the time, and Marco Rubio and Rick Scott were my senators, so I didn't have a lot of faith in their response. But is there anything else I can do as a military member? Like, I don't like this. I want to let know, up the chain of command. It's like, there's nothing, you don't have an obligation. You have an obligation not to follow an unlawful order, but no one's ordering you to like send weapons or do anything. So it's like, you can call and like, that's it. I was like, okay, cool. And so I, told him getting out, and he didn't ask too many questions. He said, support you, and thanks for all your hard work, and it was great. So like I said, the people I worked with on a day-to-day basis, great people, right? Loved working with all of them. And it wasn't, I think that was the most frustrating part about it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Right
Thank you,
before
Ronnie.
Rima, if that's okay, I'm just going to make another quick mod announcement. Guys, let's get up to the 50 subs. That allows subs to be handed out. Obviously puts us on the FYP. Subs are one of the quickest ways. If you have not, above at the top of your screen, there's Taz's name. You're going to see an orange heart. Hit the orange heart. 1 coin to join the team, 2 coins to send team bracelets. There's also new hearts underneath the exclusive gift. You have to hit the 30 bracelets, I think, before you hit that pushes the FYP. So let's do this, guys. Get to the FYP. Tap share. The shares are okay, but let's get them up a little bit more, guys. Let's push it to the FYP. Get as many people on this live as we can. These are really important words, right? These are really, really important words. Anything you could do to protect the live, please do. Tap, 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 share, share, share. Join the team. Taz, can you redo the gift goal, sis? Because that'll put you back on the FYP as well. Mods,
Thank
guys,
you.
or not mods, subs. Subs is the quickest way. Let's go, guys.
I know we are limited on time,
I
but
can, like, if we go to 10 Eastern, I think that's fine. Another 20 minutes, especially if people are like, I'm happy to get back.
absolutely. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to my amazing Palestinian sister from Gaza, Rima. Go ahead.
Hi, Radley. First of all, I just wanted to thank you. I watched your videos before speaking to you, and they were very touching. I even have you reposted on my FYP. I apologize if my voice is low. I have some company over, and I don't want to wake them. So I have a few questions. The first question, so I don't forget, is a question from the chat. And the question is have you received any backlash from your comrades and your community, especially being someone of the Christian faith? That is the first question. Would you like for me to give you all the questions, or would you like for me to ask you one question at a time?
It's up to you.
Okay, very good. So have you received any backlash? We as Palestinians are seeing, and pro-Palestinians, as all oppressed, marginalized groups, are seeing the shift in the air here in the United States and worldwide. And I'm wondering, of course, we're seeing it from our point of view. I'm wondering how you are seeing things from your point of view within your communities, which are close circles and tight communities. Are there many of your comrades who wish to do the same thing that you did and are scared and feel that they would be criticized or that they are somehow betraying their oath to the United States of America or to the colony of Israel? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. I think for the first one, I'm not super active on social media. I mean, Taz found me through Facebook Marketplace. So I don't really like posting on social media. I feel very uncomfortable just sharing stuff in general. So by virtue of that, I don't really, I'm sure there's been backlash, but I'm not reading it. The HA plus stuff has been super positive. I think the fact of the matter is like, it's my story, right? And like, I see myself as a Palestinian, and I guess if you're soulless enough to think that I'm a bad person for not wanting innocent people to be killed, then I don't really care what you think. As far as family backlash, there hasn't been. It's not really backlash. I think a lot of my family's kind of in the don't ask, don't tell space. Like they don't really want to know. They're not that interested. Like we bring Gaza up or Palestine up, and it kind of just like ends the conversation. So it hasn't been negative. It's more disheartening that they don't care as much. So that's kind of painful, but not like in a I haven't like lost any family relationships over my decision. Your second question was the last one was the military one. As far as like people, I mean, to be honest with you, I was kind of scared. Like I wanted to be more vocal. I kind of felt gaslit myself, right? You bring it up, and a lot of other white people are not as not as tied into it, and so you're like, do I care? Am I? When no one's watching the same thing, so I think a lot of people, it's a combination of just aren't as aware, are able to they're just caught up in the days of life. But I also think there's this kind of thing of like they don't want to be that person. So it does take a lot to step up and say like I'm not going to do this anymore. And I kind of did it more or less it was a slow boil for me. Like I didn't stand up right away and say like I'm resigning. And like publicly leaving the next day. I was kind of like I resigned quietly to myself. Like I told a few people around me, and then I think I decided to make more noise the longer this goes on, and just seeing it continue to go on just infuriates me as well. So like now that I'm on the other side, I'm happy to be as loud as I can. And then your question was about the middle one was Trump, right? Or
My question was about the shift in our community that we see and the shift in the air here in the United States and worldwide. My question is of course, that's our point of view. And when I say our, I'm talking about Palestinians and or other marginalized groups. My question is do you see that shift in your own community? And when I say that, I talk about people of a certain group, of certain faiths, even though Christianity is practiced by millions and billions of people across the world. Do you see that people have finally opened their eyes and they realize that Jesus alayhi salam was a Palestinian and not a Polish man?
I think the challenge for all of us, right, is like, again, just more and more like our liberations bound up together, right? Palestinians, Black people, white people, right? Like being oppressors or descendants of people who've been oppressors. White supremacy is bad for white people as well. But it's a pretty strong drug, right? I think that's hardest for white people, especially, I'm fairly privileged. And a lot of my friends are fairly privileged, and so it's easy to kind of like detach from the hard stuff, thinking that it won't affect you. We're trying to curate community where that is not a thing. We're trying to make life choices where that's not a thing, right? So that we don't fall victim or kind of fall asleep to what's going on. But I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who still don't want to wake up to the reality of how awful the consequences of some of our decisions have been. Trump has a way, though, of he's kind of like pulls the veil back of what's really happening. And so I think as white people become more and more uncomfortable, especially kind of liberal, high-minded types, there's hopefully an opportunity for alignment with and kind of coordinating with struggles with Palestinians, with, people of color. I have a little bit of hope, but, not too much. I think money and power speak a lot in this country, and that makes me sad.
Thank you, Riley, and all of us thank you as a Palestinian community for being brave enough to go against the grain and for having this very strong conviction within yourself, even though I'm sure it's very difficult because you're going against the narrative that is trying to be pushed. So we thank you kindly. The people of Gaza, thank you. The people of Palestine, thank you. And please remember, you have a second family here, and open arms. So thank you so much for taking your time. I'm gonna drop taznemoo. You're more than welcome to bring Brother Mo back up. Anyone you like. Thank you so much.
I just ask
Thank you,
one
Rima.
question from the chat before Nichelle goes, Taz.
Yeah, sure, go.
This is from Curly. He goes, how overt is the influence over APAC inside the military/government, and is it taboo to discuss it?
No, it's not overt at all. I mean, that's the thing that makes it so dangerous, right? Is I think even within politics for a long time, it was kind of like the open secret, but no one really talked about it. I think the thing that's more overt, right, is all these. So the kind of at a high level these work is the money we send to Israel is really we're giving them a gift card, right, that they can take to the military, the American military store, and buy whatever they want. And so I think the influence of these big military contractors, that is the thing that is kind of like more obvious, right? And so I think there's a lot of the lobbying. Really, part of it is like the APACs, but part of it's like the Boeings, the Lockheeds, the Northrops, the Raytheons. Like they're the ones that when the U.S. approves a $17 billion aid package to Israel, that's going right into their bottom line. And so those influences are noticeable, and I think there's a lot of frustration, honestly, within the military, at least in my military community I worked with those big contractors, because people see them for who they are, as worried about their shareholders first and foremost.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, I was gonna let Nichelle
Yeah,
go.
I was
Go
just
ahead,
saying
Nichelle.
thank you. Go ahead.
WA money. Go ahead, Nichelle, and then we'll go to Aisha.
Hey everybody, hey Riley, good to meet you. Taz, W Usis, W Mods. I'm sitting here trying to research for my question. I just learned something from you when you were talking about being a Christian and how to reach people. That's something that I've been struggling with in my own community. However, black churches and evangelical Christianity and what you were sharing on how to reach people is different. I just learned that. And so I want to thank you for being open to all of the different questions, because it's going to take all of us, right? It's an ideology. I've had the great fortune of meeting so many different people from different communities on this app, and also, from around the world. And a lot of people sometimes will ask me or DM me and go, kind of the same questions that we have now, like, seriously, what gives? What is the deal with Americans and they're being beholden to Israel, right? And there's a bunch of different layers to that, obviously, but Christianity is a big one. I would go sometimes and I would play this post on live of American politicians who were asked political questions, right, regarding, like, say, an arms embargo or a ceasefire and things like that. And instead of answering in a political way, they would answer in a biblical way. It is one of the most profound posts that I have to really kind of wake people up and show people that even though, we're supposed to have this idea of separation of church and state, if you are an American politician, they are largely, right, white, evangelical Christian. A lot of them are. And they answer that way. And so what I've tried to do with my community, but you kind of made a little bit of a distinction there, saying that coming from your level of privilege, it's not so much the connection, like what you were saying about the tenets of our faith, right? Necessarily in terms of like giving up something or sacrificing something. It's just kind of like you said, it kind of fades to black when you bring it up. What I've tried to do in my community when I bring it up, I'm always hit with, well, the Bible says that if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed, and, the
Yep, yep,
prophecies and all
yep.
those things. So I appreciate you sharing what you shared, because I interact with all different types of Christians. And I put in the chat, one of the hooks that I've tried to make inroads in to kind of wake people up and let them see is that when you talk about Israel in that way, I'm talking about the secular government of Israel, right? I didn't say anything about, and that seems to kind of break a little bit and give me a moment to kind of say, we're talking about, the same way I'd be talking about Mexico or I'm talking about Canada,
100%.
right? And so I don't know if that helps, but I do believe that it's going to take different people with different access to different communities to be able to try to reach people. Because again, when I play that video about the politicians and they're quoting scripture, right, that tells me a lot. That informs me of how they're governing, how they're representing the broader public. So I really appreciate you, sharing what you're sharing. And I feel you. I could see it in your face. I was just like, it's really difficult to try to get, because faith is something that is very deeply ingrained. And when they feel like that, at least in my community, when they feel like you're going against the faith, right? And once I try to break it all down to them, then I'm met with, well, they've been fighting since the beginning of time. It's
Totally.
like, for the
All the
love of
things, yeah.
God, you know what I mean? It's just like,
Well, I
so
think the thing I've
go
learned
ahead.
too is we hold beliefs in community, right? We think we believe what we believe individually, but it's like very much the people around us influence how we believe. And so I think that's the hard thing too, right? Is you can convince someone, but then they'll fall right back into it because everyone else around them kind of reinforces that. And so that's kind of the challenge in itself too, right? Is that these groups, like there's value there, it makes you kind of robust to quick changes, but things that you fall back, these talking points kind of, they get a life of their own and then just kind of get seated in there and they kind of almost become gospel in of itself.
Agreed. That's all I wanted to say. I
Yeah,
appreciate that, and
cool.
I thank you for sharing that, because that was illuminating that um, evangelical Christian is not the same, even though we share the same tenets of faith. So that helps me when I'm speaking to different communities. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's also just to kind of remind me of like part of my story, right? Actually moving to Israel is where I lost my faith in evangelicalism. I kind of opened my eyes to how toxic it really is. We were part of a messianic Jewish congregation when I lived there, and it was very Zionist, right? They're very. It was kind of weird. The pastor was Arab Israeli, Palestinian, but it kind of completely bought into Zionism, kind of a Christian Zionist version of Zionism. And it was so weird to me of all these, Christians, right? Like they would call themselves Messianic Jews, but these Christians, but they were totally fine with taking over Palestinian Christians' land in the West Bank, and like it was so weird to me. It's like these are brothers and sisters in the faith, right? Like how can you justify like the nationalism piece and the kind of the Zionism? I didn't have the words to say it then, but that's when it started kind of like stuff like, and then I saw all the Christian national stuff with following Trump and just kind of completely throwing their morals aside to support political power. And that's kind of when I saw how entangled it was within the Republican Party. And then it's just kind of expanded more over. So like that's where, my kind of faith deconstruction happened, and that kind of thing paved the way for me to have the courage to kind of even be louder and say this is wrong. Like I kind of had separation from my parents' faith and the faith of my community, which kind of allowed me to kind of move forward.
You keep sharing your story. Um, are you on other social media, so that I know
Like I
you
said,
said that you're
I'm a
not?
kind of a shy, like I'll do some media stuff, but I don't yeah, I don't really like this stuff is fine.
We'll try to get him a TikTok. Maybe we'll work on that. What do
I was
you
gonna say,
think?
Taz, yeah, we gotta
If we
follow
get
up with
you a
Riley.
TikTok, I know a
Yeah.
lot of the speakers don't have like any social media, especially like with TikTok, but maybe we'll have to get you on and get your voice is very powerful, of course. Like this story is very important that everybody needs to hear, and it could change minds. It's very important. So hopefully we'll see.
All right.
What do you think? And then we'll have one more question from our sister Aisha.
Hello, hello, Riley. I am Aisha. How are you? I kind of joined in kind of late, so I'm the hellraiser of the group, but here I am.
Rock on.
Um, thank you. I am glad that you resigned. I never look at people as heroes that do the right thing. I just look at them as just doing the right thing.
I
So my
appreciate that.
question is it's a very short question, I guess. Are you familiar with Aaron Bushnell? I hope I'm saying his last name.
Yeah. We talked about him a little bit earlier. I know you said you just joined. No, he was his self-immolation was a huge motivation for me to do what I did.
Okay, so he had the ultimate sacrifice where he sacrificed his life because of the genocide in Gaza. And of course, I was late, so I didn't hear. But I wanted to know, in retrospect, how do you feel about your Aaron Brushout moment? Because you lived, but that's still a moment. That's still an extreme moment. And I'm not sure how long you were in the military. How long were you in the military?
16 years in total.
Okay, so you've been in there for a little minute. How, in retrospect, how has this decision changed you? And if you had to do it all over again, would you have?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So my last day when I actually left, like officially left the military, I had they threw me a going away party, which was really nice. And I got up and kind of just told everyone who hadn't learned why I was leaving. The last thing I read was Aaron Bushnell's last words. And it was, what he did and what he said continues to have a very real impact on me, right? Like, we like to look in the past and say like, oh, it's awful Jim Crow South or, the Holocaust or whatever. Like, I would have done something different. And it's like, you're doing the same thing now. And so I think that's something that sticks with me. It's pretty strong. Yeah, I think the one thing, knowing what I know now, I probably wish I would have been louder sooner, right? Like, I didn't realize how deep this went, how kind of much the rot went. So I'm incredibly, I have zero regrets. If only thing, I would have said something sooner. I don't know if it made a difference, but yeah.
I was just wondering because this was a life changing relationship, a life changing decision.
Yeah.
So going forward, what do you think is going to happen now?
Like, to me personally?
No, just the whole situation.
Oh, I don't know. I am so disgusted, honestly, Aisha. The 30-day, me and a bunch of the other resignees put out a video. Kind of, there was a 30-day ultimatum sent by Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin to Israel, and that deadline passed a couple days ago. And of course, they didn't do anything, even though Israel clearly didn't meet the demands that they put in the letter. And it seems like Biden's completely feckless. Is not going to do anything on his way out the door, and Donald Trump is corrupt as all get out. So, like, not to be too depressing, I don't know. Like, our leaders are not going to do the right thing, but I do get a lot of faith from just more and more people saying like, this is fucked up, and we're not going to do this anymore, right? And standing up and making more noise. And I think as a collective, there's an opportunity here. If we can harness it, but what that looks like and how that comes to fruition, I don't know.
All
Sorry,
right.
there's probably a kernel of hope in there somewhere, but I keep getting. I'm not surprised, but just continue to get disappointed by just how corrupt our leaders are.
If it's
Yeah.
okay, I do want to just kind of deliver a message from Gaza, actually. So, what's really freaking amazing about TikTok is that we have the ability to actually talk to them. People that are on the ground, right? We know their stories, we know their names,
Yeah.
we know it all, and there's a lot of the people that were on the app every day. Pretty much this panel's on this app every day, and most of the people in the chat. I've been messaging back and forth with him and explaining to him what you're saying and what you're doing and what you stood for. And he wanted to thank you. No, it's not Abu Siraj. It's actually somebody else, Muhammad. So he wanted me to thank you. The words are reaching Gaza. And he wanted to thank you for your story. He wanted to thank you for your stance. He wanted to thank you for not forgetting them. And those are his words.
No crying, guys.
No, I'm
No
not
one
crying.
cried.
No, I'm
Well,
not
I
crying.
will
This is
say,
rejoicing, guys. This is rejoicing. This is solidarity.
yeah, no,
Okay?
that's, I mean, especially as a white hetero dude, right? Like straight dude, it's like, I think this is like the least I could probably do. It's just a ton of, I think it's people like these forums are really powerful for me. My friend, she's actually, if you want to say thank you, her name's Safa Suleiman. She's a children's author. She's got a debut book coming out. So she was my friend from back in 2014 when I first really got to know her, 2013, 2014. So yeah, if you pay it forward, she's an amazing Palestinian American mother of three, author, and the reason I'm probably here today is largely because of her influence. Her book's called Hilwa's Gifts.
Can we put that in the chat? Sorry, Riley, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah,
We'd
yeah.
Yeah,
love
what
to
is it?
support.
Here,
Hilwa's.
well,
I don't. This is where I feel like a boomer right now.
we can have anybody, one of the mods, if the mods can type this down, Safa Suleiman, and the book is called, if you can spell it, I don't know. Oh,
H
Hilwa's
I
Gift.
H.
Oh,
Yeah, you see?
Hilwa's Gift. Yeah,
Yeah, Hilwa.
Hilwas Gifts
I
by
wish I would have
Safa
learned Arabic.
Suleiman.
I wish I would have learned Arabic instead of Hebrew, but unfortunately, it's. But yeah, no. If you like, she's an amazing person, and if you want to support her, I think that would be an incredible way. It's also, yeah. Anyway,
Taz, I have one more ask before he leaves. Riley, I apologize for coming back up. I know you said 10 Eastern. I have one more ask. Would love to have you join my joint podcast with Dr. Liam O'Mara if you're up for it. If that's something that interests you when time permits, I'd love to find out how to get in contact with you. You can always DM me, or I could get in contact with you through Taz.
yeah. If you talk to Taz, she's got my my number.
Yeah, I can forward it to you, JBS.
Awesome. Thank you, Taz. Appreciate you again, Riley. God bless, man. Take care. Be safe. And
Absolutely.
appreciate you, Taz, for doing this amazing. And everybody in here, you guys are just wow. That's all I can say. And I'm going to drop
It's
again.
honestly, it's a gift for me, right? Like I feel honored to be here. Like I said, I think especially people who have family, people who are in Gaza, like who, like are like in it. It's the whatever. I'm glad if I can give just a modicum of support and love and make you feel like you're not alone. That means the world to me. So thank you for the opportunity.
Can I ask one final question?
Thank
I
you
know I'm
so
holding
much.
you up.
Sure.
Oh,
Keep the
Sorry,
times
I
rolling.
know. Really quickly, what's one message you have for everybody here and to all the Americans that are watching?
Oh, I mean, our liberation's bound up together, right? None of us is free until all of us are free. And then I just get in touch with your humanity. I think is the thing that's been, to me, is like I don't, again, just how can you look at some of these pictures of the destruction and the people happening in Gaza or Sudan or wherever, right? Just like realize that, like, don't lose your humanity.
But this is actually a push for you. So is there anything that we could do to support you? Is there a book? Is there anything that we could do
Like I
to
said, I'm
support
not like
you?
this. My thing is, like, I'm an engineer, right? Like I'm nerding out. I got it. I'm not a kind of an influencer. I like these forums. I'm totally happy to do, but I'm not necessarily in the space of trying to have a blog. Or I also want to be careful. Like, it's not my story. Like, I don't want to stand in the way of Palestinians telling your story. Right? I don't want to be the white dude who comes in as the, so that's the thing I'm conscious of as well. Right. So I'm happy to amplify things, go on people's podcasts, do these live stuff. But I don't like posting to Instagram or Facebook, or maybe it's the military in me. I'm a little naive, or not naive, but whatever, private.
that's amazing.
So what I'll say
Yeah,
this,
W, amazing.
if there's other opportunities and you think people want to continue to hear from me, or there's something that has value that would
Yeah,
provide
absolutely.
this podcast, keep me I'm happy to kind of to bump people if that's something that you think would be valuable. I do want to give back to my Palestinian brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Riley. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time. I mean, everybody in the chat is just somebody said this is a breath of fresh air. And you're an amazing human being. I teared up listening to you and watching you. I'm like, no more, like no more tears. But thank you again. Thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again. Hopefully we'll have you again. I mean, everybody really enjoyed this, and keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate it as Palestinians.
I'm so happy to help. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much.